Alright, hello. Let's see how that... Okay. So, I'm just going to go ahead and say welcome to History in Review. Keith is currently staring into the screen. But, yeah, the topic we're covering today is the Resurrection Men, which was a group of people in the Victorian era, and primarily the UK, but it did have some outside occurrences. But they were basically a group of grave robbers that, rather than grave robbing, like for precious artifacts, they took the bodies instead. And the reason why it got really popular in the Victorian era, especially towards like the later portion in the 1800s, universities needed bodies for dissection and medical study, and the standard methodologies of getting it from executed criminals, orphans that had no one to claim them, and other people who actually donated their bodies to science, which donating your body to science, it wasn't exactly common, and on top of that, public paperwork was a nightmare back then.
So this was legal.
There were technically ways to do it legally, but for the most part, if you got caught digging up a grave, then you would catch a lot of hell. But if you didn't get caught and you were just found with the body, then as long as you didn't actually kill the person, and you didn't have any of their possessions that were on them at the time they died, you kind of get away with it. From what I've seen, the legality of it was brought into question, especially because so many people were freaked out about it. Let's just go ahead and grab those for you. But yeah.
Refreshments.
But yeah, the legality of it was more there wasn't really anything to stop it, effectively. So, your loved one just got buried. You come back, you find they would wait they needed it to be fresh, so generally it was like day of, day after, maybe even 3 days at most, because they needed the bodies fresh, and refrigeration was an issue, of course. So, in the dead of night, they'd get to digging. Some of the ways that people tried to combat this were something called corpse cages, which were...
I know about the corpse cages.
Yeah.
A lot of people believe that people made the corpse cages to keep in people from coming back from the dead.
Well, that could have been one use, but considering the fact that there's a lot of the grave robbing going on, it was a lot more likely they wanted to, keep their corpse in their coffin.
I mean,
the another thing was, for if you were poor, you could technically rent out a concrete slab to be placed on top of the thing, making it effectively a real pain in the ass to steal your body for about a week or so, making sure that your body was completely unusable for the purposes that the Resurrection Men wanted. So, after that point, your lease was up on it, and they raised that shit and dropped it on someone else's grave.
I respect that.
That is like... That is some shady business there.
Anything dealing with the graveyard, cemeteries is some shady business.
Well,
especially if you got men wanting to go in there and get the most complex 3D puzzles that have ever existed. The human skeleton.
yeah, I'd say there's harder 3D puzzles.
I couldn't put a skeleton together. You ever seen the femur bone? It's the biggest bone in the body. Well, there's another bone that looks like a smaller femur. When you pick that bone up, you're going to think that's the femur. That's what got me in anatomy and physiology.
But no, part of what made it so shady is the simple fact that whenever the bodies got to university, they didn't always ask, or for the most part, since it was such a shady business dealing, and there's so much legality questions, a lot of the universities didn't ask questions.
As you don't.
Yeah. They just show up with a body, it's like, hey, this one's fresh. Here's your pounds. And then they take the body, the grave robber goes back to grave robbing.
We don't ask questions in the name of science here. No.
Yeah, that's So, I'd say probably the two most notable people known for this practice would be, or most infamous for it, would be Burke and Hare.
Who the hell is that?
They started off as like simple blue collar laborers, but eventually, I think one of them came into possession of property, and one of his renters died, and he was pissed because he couldn't collect rent. So what he did was,
he collected the renter. He collected the body.
Yeah, he collected the body, got his buddy
money
in on it. They dropped the body off, and then
who says you can't collect from the dead, man? Who says that these days?
Just a very fucked situation. Throw in the fact that after this, they decided it was too good of money to wait till someone died.
Does it kill somebody?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, popular tactic was, like, they were from Scotland, if I remember correctly. No, they were from somewhere else, but they ended up, I think, in Edinburgh. Their popular tactic was to invite someone back to their house for drinks, get them absolutely royally fucked to where they couldn't fight back, and then they'd suffocate them.
Speaking of, Alex, I'm gonna need you to just break into that benchmark right there and get a little going.
A little going?
So I can get my plans going for... never mind.
What? Okay.
You know,
if I go missing, Keith's to blame.
You know the human heart's worth... I think I can get at least $25,000 off the human heart these days.
I don't know. Mine's probably not in the greatest shape there, mate.
$10,000 discount, right?
You were talking all this shit about how I shouldn't be drinking Four Locos. Now you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, keep drinking the Four Locos. But no, I don't necessarily know their total body count. All I know is it was a lot.
Would you say that this is probably maybe what they were doing then kind of inspired what goes on with organ harvesting now with the black market?
Yes and no. I'd say for the most part the fact that human body parts has a price on it is that does lean into the modern day practice of black market organ removal, but the methodologies and the reasons for it have changed. So
I'm about to end up on a list.
You're about to end up on a list. Are you looking up?
I'm looking up prices for the sake of history and science.
I think if I remember correctly, a testicle is $40,000.
I remember someone saying an ad, your local college wants your testicle for $30,000. By all means, bro. $30,000. I'm taking the year off from work.
Paying off my student loan.
A skull costs $1,200. I mean, a kidney is $2,060,000.
Jesus Christ!
You can live with one kidney.
Yeah, you can.
Does anybody want my kidney?
Well, the thing is even the issue with living with one kidney is that it's a lot more prone to
fail.
Well, not only that, but any issues you have will be exacerbated because it has to do double the work of the other kidney,
that's true.
or at least to my knowledge. I could be talking complete and utter bullshit, but
I mean, some of this isn't as expensive as I thought it'd be. Your spleen is worth $508.
Well, yeah, that's because spleens would technically be one of the more common things you could get, but you can also survive without a spleen.
Skin is $10 per square inch.
Yeah.
I'm getting off this list.
I know blood's pretty fucking expensive. But yeah. the modern day, like buying and selling of organs, generally there's a lot more of a preference for kind of keeping someone alive for it.
But back in the day, it wasn't.
Well, I can kind of see how where if you had an old infirm family member that you didn't like, I could kind of see how some of them might get knocked off for this. But then again, like, this whole practice ain't exactly new. Of like the whole, once you're dead, you get like just rolled over and screwed. Because I don't know how much you know about like the ancient burial practices in most cities. How much do you know about charnel houses?
Hey man, I'm gonna know whatever you tell me right here now.
So
I am clueless about this topic.
have you you've read Romeo and Juliet, right?
Of course, man.
Okay, charnel houses. I mean, there was different names and different kinds of styles, but they were decently common. A family or prominent group would own a charnel house, and for that one, you would have certain technically families would have mausoleums and such where they could actually store the bodies. But if you're poor Joe Billy,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on whether or not your city had a lot of flooding, there would just be slabs in just basically a giant stone building, and there'd be on those slabs would be the bodies. They'd be placed there. However, with these cities, a lot of people died all the time, so they needed space. You want to take like 3 guesses what happened once you like decompose to the point where you're.
You got yeeted out of the hole and then went to the next person?
They would basically just brush your bones off to the side of the charnel house and then drop the new dead body on your slab.
I respect it. I mean, if you look at nowadays, graveyards are just filling up. We're running out of room for these bodies.
Running out of room?
We're out of room.
We're out of room? Okay, there are studies that suggest that you can technically fit the entire Earth's population of human beings in an area no bigger than Texas. It'd be a bit cramped.
But sir, where are we gonna get where are we gonna get this open will in the land to put all these bodies in?
But like the catacombs in Paris, that used to be, the very beginnings of Paris, it was a quarry.
Yeah.
And eventually they stopped using the quarry as much as it used to be, so they had some space to fill. And you had a lot of dead people and a lot of bones around the graveyards from like the practice, Basically, this person's all bones. No one recognizes him anymore. Probably all of his relatives are dead. But we got a new dead body because people actually care about him. So let's dig this old guy up who no one gives a fuck about anymore. And let's just chunk his bones down somewhere.
Mm.
Generally, that's the origin of like most of the...
Well, now I'm learning that skulls are $1,200, so they at the very least pick up the skull.
Well, I mean, back then there wasn't really skull replacement surgery.
I mean, not even skull replacement surgery. I'm sure there's some rich guy back there that's like, you know what?
Well,
I want a shelf.
Well, generally, if there was a rich guy back then that wanted a skull, they wouldn't have to pay for a skull. They'd just make one.
Make one? Oh, kill him?
Yeah, basically.
I mean, you have to pay someone to kill him.
Have you never heard of Gil de Ra? I'm probably absolutely messed up that pronunciation, but
I'm gonna say yes, but you messed up the pronunciation, so no.
He was originally most famous for being Jeanne d'Arc's lieutenant or main captain. Basically, very close relation to her.
Yeah.
After those wars ended, I think he became known as like it was like Bluebeard or Blue. It was something along the lines of basically a boogeyman to children, because him and a couple of his compatriots would get poor little boys and bring them into his castle, and then sadistically torture, rape, and murder them.
This should have been on. This one should have been posted before Halloween was over.
Yeah. I know he's featured in, I think it's the prequel of the Fate series, like the anime. But
that's weeb shit.
That is weeb shit. But that series is actually pretty fantastic, because just for the simple fact that it throws in like enough history bits.
But do they go Super Saiyan?
Technically, yes. They have.
I'm angry.
I mean, you do have Gilgamesh, who's a fun one, but they also make him a very, very white dude, which I guess kind of leans into the whole idea of like the Aryans moving into India.
Yeah.
But which is kind of amazing that like no one really knows much about that group of people.
History is told by the victor, and they sound like they were the victors.
Well, yeah, they had some initial victories, especially in like northern India, but eventually like they just kind of disappeared. Like even originally, like no one really knows where they came from. There's thoughts they came from like Europe, but no one really quite knows that. But back to the whole fun factor of messed up grave practices. On top of the charnel houses, if you did have just a regular old burial site in the city, of course that'd be dug up, you'd be replaced. There was also the whole factor of there were specialized grave sites for what is that? Yeah, why not? But there were specialized grave sites for different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the Catholic one. It was a decent grave.
The pristine one.
It was the one that you wanted to be buried.
Where the heathens didn't go.
It was where you wanted to put Grandma when she passed. Or, you know, if you didn't like Grandma, maybe before that. But, anyways. But there was also a graveyard for foreigners and groups that were not well liked.
Mm-hmm.
Some cities, this was like this kind of segregation and separation of like grave sites was a lot more prominent than others.
Yeah.
Especially, I think the closer you get to the Middle East, about the time you start having a lot more interactions with Muslims and other like Jews and such like that.
Yes.
That's about the time you start seeing a lot more of that. But even then, back in like Europe and such, if you had someone that was like more pagan style, they can very easily be like told by the Catholic Church to go find yourself another hole, basically.
Oh no, this is the Lord's hole. You can't be put here.
Yeah. If I'm remembering, or I've seen a couple of pictures where there's you have like the Catholic graveyard, and then immediately outside that you have plots for the regular Joes, and there are a few examples of like graves that actually match over the wall. But another thing, suicide victims were generally not given a spot in the.
So they were probably more up to grabs of being.
Yeah, that's kind of
grabbed.
That's kind of one of the things about like in Hamlet, whenever he goes on his whole spiel about like in the graveyard,
mm-hmm.
or technically that happens before that, but just where he's talking about poor York and all that. Part of the reason why he has so many issues whenever he shows up there is because Ophelia killed herself, or allegedly killed herself, and happened off screen. Generally, it's not accepted to have her buried Catholic. So,
because suicide
or
is
Protestant,
a sin.
it all kind of depends. Like, because that can meld very weirdly.
Yeah.
Those two beliefs.
So I guess to kind of getting close to the end of it, for purposes of science and research on these bodies, was this the moral way to go? We're not talking about murdering them and doing it, but like stealing it after someone has passed. Would you say it was morally right to do it? Like looking from a scientific point of view versus like a spiritual point of view where like someone would be like, no, that's awful. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the question whenever you're looking at historical bits and bobs, because you're supposed to look at it objectively without putting your modern day morals on it. But considering the simple fact that whenever you look at accounts of this and like the reactionary stuff, they didn't like it either. And I would say maybe if the universities had been a lot more direct and like went to the groups of people that were dying and was like, hey, can we get it, like, we're offering to pay you this sum of money to your family after you die. Think of it as like death insurance.
Yeah. That probably would have went over
that probably would have went a lot better. But the thing is, like, even post that, like, the factor of, like, with the style of grave robbing.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't necessarily just bodies that were taken, it was other objects.
Yeah.
And considering how many people were being executed at the time...
A lot of grave robbing going on.
It's technically not like, the executions technically aren't, like, too obscene at the time this was going on, but
yeah,
it was still pretty common to have executions. So maybe they'd been a bit more conservative with their, like, efforts.
Yeah.
And then also a bit more, like, open to other possibilities, other than, you know, creepy dude knocks on the door, is like, Master, I have you a pile of bodies. And then you just say, here's your money.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Ooh, don't touch me.
Yeah, I think that's probably, like, some of the inspiration for whenever the, like, the early Frankenstein, like, Igor.
Yeah.
Kind of that style of guy.
Oh, man.
Which is kind of funny, because if I remember correctly, he never pops up in the book. He's just kind of like the after.
You know, and also, it wasn't Frankenstein, and Frankenstein was the monster, you know?
I mean, the monster was just the monster. It was
the monster.
I'm talking about, like, Frankenstein
himself. Okay, I was making sure. Some people were like, Frankenstein. No. That's Frankenstein's monster.
You know, I'm gonna go and make this public knowledge to anyone listening to this. I'm not a fan of the Frankenstein book. The main reason why is because you have the monster who has legitimate problems and actual thoughts about, like, the reality of what it means to be him. And then you have Frankenstein, who spends the entire book leading some form of privileged life. Yes, he's experienced tragedy, but he actually finds some sort of solution or thought process to this, and then immediately abandons it once he succeeds, and then bemoans the fact that he succeeded.
No one said he was there, like, he was in it to the end, man.
Well, my whole thing is, like, anytime it looks like he's about to, like, you know, actually decide to do something for certain,
yeah, he
whimpers out of it. Like, whether it's destroying the monster, helping the monster, like, whether or not he even needs to make the monster, or, like, the entire time it's just nothing but indecision and
bullshit.
Yeah. And then, like, anytime he does successfully do something, like, he's about to make, like, he makes the monster, he abandons the monster. He goes to, you know, decide, you know, I'm going to make this right, I'm going to make him a mate. He's literally, like, moments away from bringing her to life, and then just says, he looks up and, like, supposedly sees an evil look in this dude's eye, and he's like, now, I must destroy this.
I love it.
Yeah.
If only the grave robbers and all that good business was like,
that's probably also
pretty evil.
Yeah.
We should stop.
I'm also pretty sure that, like, the whole resurrection men and all of that was a good inspiration, on top of the fact that at the same time they're especially towards the end of the Victorian era and about the time of, like, the early 20th century is when you got a lot of the electricity experiments on bodies. So you start seeing, like, muscles moving and stuff like that. That's the reason why the depiction is always a lightning bolt. So,
which is the way I prefer it.
But yeah, that is the Resurrection Man. I'm Alex.
And I'm Keith.
And welcome to thank you for listening to History in Review. Sorry about bludgeoning that all up.
If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like, comment, and feel free to subscribe, because we're hoping to bring new content to you on a more regular basis. I know we've been going for a while and scheduling and all that, but we're going to try to do a little bit better to at least have more videos up in more timely manner.
Yeah.
And we'd like to thank everybody who is listening, all 50 of you. Maybe me 5 times over, double checking the video's views, but maybe all 45 of you. But yeah, thank you.
Kyle, maybe you can enjoy this one.
Yeah, Kyle, enjoy this one. Thank you, and have a very, very great Thanksgiving. Hopefully this gets posted before Thanksgiving.